Welcome back to another episode of the Zeg Talk podcast. We're coming in after an impressive week by Gonzaga where they won against BYU in commanding fashion and then followed it up with a dominant win against Santa Clara and took back their number one ranking for the first time since the start of the season. I don't remember which week we lost it, but probably around Thanksgiving time after the Duke loss. So it was a big week, a lot going on in college basketball with some really good teams losing one or multiple games. So we're going to touch on the BYU game and Santa Clara game and then move on to what to expect going forward with our new matchup this Thursday with San Francisco, and then touch on some other WCC and college basketball action. All right, Dylan, give us your initial thoughts on the BYU game.
Yeah, what an amazing victory. I think it was awesome to have, Brian and I discussed it pregame. Are there ways that BYU can potentially win this game? Sure. Are there ways that this game could be incredibly close? Absolutely. Did I take the spread at minus 14.5 for the Zags? Yes, I did. Did I make my money? Yes, I did, because it was a commanding victory. I mean, I don't think BYU ever really stood a chance in this game. After obviously going down very early, 10-0 or something like that, Gonzaga State came storming back. Timmy goes 13 of 14 from the field and puts up 30 points, including 4 of 4 from the free throw line, which I love to see. Strother had 15 points in like 8 minutes in the first half and was lights out from three. I guess he was 3 for 5 from three. Nembhard had the comeback game that we've all been waiting for: 22 points, 12 assists, 0 turnovers, 2 steals. So, I mean, a phenomenal game across the board from the starters. Watson comes in and plays well off the bench. And I guess at the end, it's also cool. Joe Few got his first collegiate points as well. Initial reactions were that Gonzaga did exactly what they needed to do. They chased Barcelo off the line. He finishes 4 for 6 from 3, 7 of 14 from the field, though, for 19 points, leads BYU in scoring, but really is not like commanding game that they needed from him to have a chance in this game. Lohner finishes with 17, 5 rebounds, and 4 turnovers. That being said, most of that came in the last garbage couple minutes of the game, as this game was analytically final pretty early on in the second half, and Lohner puts up some points towards the end. I think there was quite a bit of ribbing from the student section, from everybody on social media, into probably some pretty innocent comments from him saying that people love to hate Gonzaga. Gonzaga fans, including myself, took personal affront to that. Immediately went and found some really funny content from some old interviews by him and circulated its way through the kennel, and there was quite a few chants of Caleb sucks, Caleb is ugly. I don't remember what the other one was, but really just a cool thing to see from the students kind of latch back onto a little bit of that dirt aspect and go after a couple individual players. So I thought that was really cool. That's an overall synopsis. What did you take away from the game?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that popped out, obviously, is it put up 110 points, back-to-back 100-point games, back-to-back 60-plus point first halves. And we know that they did it again against Santa Clara in the following game, which made them the first team in Division I in 25 years to score 60-plus points in 3 consecutive first halves. So just the offense ever since coming back from this COVID break has been unreal. I'm looking at some numbers just from the last 3 games where they've scored over 100. They're shooting on average 67.9% from 2-point field goal range and 46.2% from 3, compared to the average through the first 13 games. Prior to these last 3 games, the 2-point field goal percentage is around 5.5% better, and 3-point field goal percentage is almost 12% better than what it was. So I don't know if this is a new symptom going around with whatever strain of COVID is gone through Spokane, but we can suddenly shoot the crap out of the ball. And we're shooting the better percentages on more made threes as well. So, it's not like we're just not shooting as much and taking better shots. We're making 11 per game over the last 3, which is 3 more than our season average prior to those games. So really shooting the crap out of the ball, which I think has started to open up the paint for Timmy inside a little bit, which has been shown through his numbers through the last 3 games as well. BYU, he put up 30. We knew that was going to be a big game for him, just given the lack of big man for for BYU to compete against him inside. But one thing I've noticed with Timmy starting in the BYU game really was that he's been a lot more quick and decisive with his post moves earlier in the season when we were seeing some of the, I don't even know how to describe it, just some of the legs in the offense where we'd kind of go dead for a little bit. And, you know, he was pounding the air out of the ball in the post, reminded me a little bit of Petrushev a little bit, where they seemed like they were trying to force it in there too much and trying to make moves off the dribble for him. And these last few games, he's really gotten back to what he's really good at, which is catching it and immediately making a move. I think Stephen Card put together a video on his mid post ups and how he's one of the best of the country in doing that. And if I think back to last year, it looked really similar to a lot of the stuff that he was doing towards the end of the season, where people just couldn't stop him because he's so quick with that initial seal. And then as the ball's coming to him, he's already making his first move, either a drop step or pivoting around. And the defense is already playing catch up at that point, and he's just getting quick, easy buckets or drawing a foul. And that's a difference that I've seen from him in these last few games where he's really taken off and, you know, back-to-back 30-point games. Could have easily had 40 against Santa Clara, probably could have had 40 against BYU too. He was out of both those games at around 7 to 10 minutes left. So really just the offense seems to be getting its flow back. Obviously the shooting helps with that, but they seem to have a lot of confidence. We're getting really good looks. And then the bench, I mean, Anton Watson has generally had a quiet last couple games. Not that he's played bad. They just haven't really needed him with how the guards have been playing, and Timmy playing really well. Also, but it's just the guys off the bench. Nolan Hickman's really coming into his own. He's shooting 40% from three on the season now. Hunter Salas has had a couple good last games. So you just see the development. We knew this team was young and that we were going to have some of those rough spots earlier in the year after some initial parts where we looked really, really good. But now I think we're starting to see that flow and rhythm come together with a lot of the new guys that were part of this team that weren't there last year. And that's, I think, the product of what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, averaging 114 points a game right now in WCC play. I think the only, and it's like a knock, like in terms of like if you look at our average points against the last couple seasons, it's lower than the 83 and a half that we're giving up right now. That being said, our points per possession and the points per possession that we're giving up to other teams is still incredibly low, considering we're scoring 115 points and, you know, teams are only able to put up 83 or so. I do want to point out, you know, Anton Watson had a quieter game against BYU. I do not want to discredit his double-double off the bench, though. 11 points, 11 boards, and a 3 against Santa Clara. So great game to see Watson get his legs back under him a little bit. I also think Hickman had a quieter game against BYU. In fact, I think he played under 20 minutes, had 4 points on 1 of 2 shooting, came back against Santa Clara, went 4 of 8 from 3, had 14 points. It seems like we're giving Hickman the runs one game. Maybe we'll give Salas a little more runs, and they're kind of playing the hot hand a little bit more. They seem to be trading off more than previous in the season. I think the other wrinkle in this is, do we think Dom Harris is going to come back? What is that going to mean for playing time? And we can discuss that in a little bit, maybe when we talk about like previewing the next couple of games. But not that Dom's going to be back in the next couple of games. But as we talk about the rest of WCC, if Dom makes a return, what is that going to look like? And what kind of depth does that add to an already incredibly deep team this year?
Yeah, and I think one thing with Hickman's minutes in the BYU game, just going back to that really quick, is I think part of that was Regier Bolton's defense. That he was kind of assigned to Barcelo for most of the game and did a really good job of just denying the ball in general. I know he still ended up with, what was it, like 20 points or whatever, but it was a really quiet night for him. He wasn't able to get into what he normally likes to do. A lot of his looks came from, you know, transition or a breakdown where it was a loose ball or a rebound and was kicked out. So Bolton did a really good job there, and I think they wanted to keep him in that spot so Hickman didn't get as much. One thing that I did notice with Hickman is he's actually averaging more minutes now per game than Watson, which you think of Watson as our sixth man, but Hickman's actually gotten more of the minutes this year. It's pretty close, but he's kind of moved into a 20-minute a game role. As for the rest of the guard rotation, once Harris comes back, if Harris comes back, it is going to be really interesting to see, because my initial thought would be that it's going to be Salas who's going to lose those minutes. I don't think Harris is going to come in and play a ton of minutes right away. He's probably going to ease his way in, depending on when he does, if he does at all. But, if we're blowing teams out, that gives him a lot more run early. But yeah, I would think Salas would be the one who gets his minutes cut into a little bit, or you take, 2 or 3 minutes off of each of Bolton and Nemhard. But at the same time, you want to keep your best guys on the floor. And we know Few really likes to do that, especially in big games, which is why, he seems to trust Hickman a lot more than Salas in those big games right now, or at least so far this season. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like when we get to March, which is probably the next time we're going to see any sort of really big game. I know we get BYU at BYU and San Francisco and St. Mary's, but playing the Dukes and the Alabamas and Texas Techs and see what that looks like. So it's going to be something that we're going to have to watch and monitor, and also that the coaching staff's going to have to obviously watch and monitor, because we don't know what level Dom is going to come back at, how long it's going to take him to get back into basketball shape, get into a flow with this team that we've finally seen kind of mesh together and get their flow and rhythm to the offense and defense. So that might throw a wrench in that, and they might not want to mess with it, or, it works out perfectly. So I guess we'll find out. Hopefully that return, if he is making a return, is coming soon. I think we had kind of penciled in maybe late January to mid-February on when he could potentially be coming back. So keep your eyes peeled and ears peeled. Is that a phrase? For any news on Dom Harris in the next few weeks.
Eyes peeled, ears open, maybe? I don't know. I don't know what it might be.
Peel them open?
Is that what it is? I don't know.
It's definitely not.
It's definitely not that. I think that Dom is the most similar to Salas in terms of athleticism, play style. I think if you're going to pick one person to pick minutes from, it's going to be him. If we get to that, we'll get to that bridge, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But I have loved the aggressiveness that I've seen out of Salas the last couple of games. That dunk against BYU was awesome. I mean, I think we said at the beginning of the season it was going to take Salas a little bit longer. I mean, the kid came from Nebraska. He's a 5-star recruit, I believe, and one of the only 5-star recruits that's ever coming out of Nebraska. It's a little bit more of an adjustment.
He's the first ever.
Yeah.
To come out of Nebraska. Yeah.
First ever to come out of Nebraska. So I think it's taking him a little bit longer to get into the full swing of playing against D1 level guys every single game. And he's shown that he can do it. I think I was a little bit nervous at his play at the beginning of the year, but the last couple games, he's just looked so good. Him and Hickman have really pulled even with each other in terms of guard minutes off the bench and just looking really decisive. I think Few still probably trusts Hickman in terms of ball handling, especially a little bit more in late game situations, or if Nemhard gets into foul trouble or isn't playing well. While we're on that topic, let's talk about the resurgence of Andrew Nemhard. After getting picked on, I think, quite a bit following some of our losses, following some of the pre-holiday, pre-COVID break play, Nemhard has really turned it on. Like I said, the Santa Clara game was so-so, but the fact that he was 22-12 with 0 turnovers against BYU is the Andrew Nemhard we love to see, including a little step back mid-range jumper from the free throw line that absolutely crossed up Caleb Lohner as well. I think he's really coming back into his own, and hopefully that's the Andrew Nemhard we'll continue to see throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think part of it might be just, as I've kind of touched on a lot today so far, just the rhythm and flow of the offense and guys getting used to where they're getting looks in this offense. We talked about it earlier in the year where Nemhard was going to be getting a lot of different looks on a lot of different spots on the floor than he did last year. Whereas, last year, you'd have the pick and roll. He would kind of be like the third or fourth worry for the defense. So he was getting some good looks off of those. He was getting a lot of kick out threes in the corners or from the low wings. This year he has the ball in his hands a lot more. So he's getting a lot of different looks. The defense are giving him different looks than what he got last year. And I think that just takes a little bit to get used to. And also now that they've started to use Hickman more as a ball handler and Sal's being in the game more as well, that they've started to move him off ball when Hickman's in to get some different looks and coming from the wing off the pick and rolls rather than initiating the offense all the time. So he just seems more comfortable. He's getting to that mid-range spot. Obviously, you talked about the BYU one where he crossed the guy up, but he's gotten that look a few more times as well, and he seems really confident in his shot in general. Whereas at the beginning of the year, it didn't seem as confident. Kind of seems like it started around the Texas Tech game where he really started getting that confidence back. So yeah, it's been great. He's averaging 15 points over the last 3 games. He only had 3 points against Pepperdine, but 22 and then 19 against Santa Clara. So that's the Andrew Nembhard we need. If he's playing like that, we're really tough to beat. So I don't know what else you can say about it. I know the turnovers were a little high against Santa Clara, but overall it was a pretty good game from him.
Let's look forward a little bit as we look at the rest of WCC play. We're going to have we got slotted into the Thursday game against San Francisco now. They pulled the Portland game and replaced that game with our makeup game against San Francisco. So that's huge for the conference. How do we feel about kind of going into that game, and how do you feel about that schedule change as well?
I'm really happy about the schedule change. I know we had been talking about what we would potentially be doing scheduling wise over that 11 game pause that we were going to have with the Pacific game being canceled and already having that only be a 1 game week. So I think it's huge that we're getting what I think to be the next best team in the WCC this year, being able to play that game. It gives us another quad 1 or potential quad 1 opportunity if San Francisco is able to move up a little bit in the net. I think, I'm not sure where they are exactly now. I know they're in the 30s. They're number 36 on KenPom, so using that as a proxy. But overall, it was going to be tough to get something scheduled non-conference. I know Brian had thrown around potentially Seton Hall early this week and then Houston early next week that it could have worked. But at the same time, we know Houston, what that was last year, and I don't even know if they would bother trying to schedule that after all the hoops we jumped through last year for them to go play Sisters of the Poor. And then just other teams, in the Big East, Seton Hall, that's a big ask to come out and play Gonzaga or meet somewhere in the middle when they already have a gauntlet to go through in the Big East. And if there was any other cancellations, it was going to be tough. Conference reschedule go first, like they come first, which is what we're doing here. So I love that it's on a Thursday. Love that they pulled a crappy game against Portland to make it happen. Love that, it's right in the middle. So we could really go without another game being scheduled here and be fine because it's not a huge break either way. Then it's kind of right in the middle. So I think it'll be good. I think it's not going to be a close game. I think Santa Clara is the second best team in the conference, but I don't think that this is going to be a close game at all. And if it was, San Francisco has some serious issues with closing games, as we've seen against Loyola Chicago and BYU. For as good a coach as Todd Golden is, and I love him, but I don't know if it's just players not executing what they're supposed to be running, or if it's a lack of structure in those late game possessions, but it's been pretty ugly for them.
I think it's a lack of experience in some of that late game, close games against good teams too. I mean, that's a part of being a rising, growing, getting better program as you get more opportunities. Obviously, they get to play Gonzaga every year, but you also get more opportunities as you get better to be in those situations. San Francisco definitely wasn't in that boat for the most part outside of the Frankie Ferrari area for a little while. So I think building back to something like that is probably part of it. I also love Todd Golden, so I'm rooting for them. I'm rooting for a 4-bid WCC. I'm in the realistic camp that a 4-bid WCC is probably not going to happen. Although rescheduling games to get San Francisco at least the opportunity to play Gonzaga this season, if heaven forbid something else happened for our second game with San Francisco, getting all of San Francisco, St. Mary's, and BYU 2 shots apiece in WCC conference play is huge for the opportunity for us as a conference to get 2 to 3 to maybe 4, but more realistically, probably 3 is about the top of the range. I see us getting into March Madness, but yeah, I think that's a great move from the conference as a whole as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love that the WCC is making that happen, and they're aware of what the situation is and the potential there. So, I mean, for San Francisco, I don't think there's any downside to playing Gonzaga. I mean, the expectation is you're going to lose by a lot. Like looking at KenPom, Gonzaga's favored by 15. They're given a 91% chance of winning the game. So for San Francisco, if they can make it a competitive game, that's kind of a win for them. I know there's been some talk about San Francisco not having really any marquee wins, but having a lot of really good losses. You know, you look at, or not a lot, but of their 3 losses, Loyola, Chicago, and BYU are pretty good ones to have. 21st in KenPom and 29th in KenPom. Loyola, Chicago is ranked now. But I guess let me ask you this question before I go into my thoughts on this really quick. Do you think it's more likely that the WCC will have 4 bids or 2 bids?
2.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. There's been talk about it after San Francisco lost to BYU last weekend on what kind of needs to happen. And the issue is San Francisco and or St. Mary's are going to have to beat each other twice, I think, to be able to make it. They don't have, unless they're able to beat Gonzaga one of the times or in the tournament. But you look at who they have left. They have Gonzaga twice. They have St. Mary's twice, and then BYU at BYU. They probably have to win that BYU game on the road. And then I think they have to win both St. Mary's games to realistically have a shot to get in. We had just mentioned before this, maybe if they lose one of those in a really tight game and then beat BYU or St. Mary's in the conference tournament, they have a shot. But it's going to be really tough. And then on the other end of that, if you're St. Mary's and you lose both of those games to San Francisco and split against BYU, I don't know if they're getting in either. So I'd love for it to be a 4-bid WCC, and it's still a potential possibility, but it seems kind of a fringe reality right now.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be especially tough with the WCC tournament as well, because you're going to have one of those teams most likely lose to Gonzaga in the second round and not the WCC final. And I think that's going to hurt whoever that is, because they're not going to get a shot to play beat one of the other teams and Gonzaga, right? They're only going to lose to Gonzaga in the tournament and not have a chance to play BYU or St. Mary's again, or San Francisco, whatever way it shakes out. So I think that's really going to hurt them come tournament, hurt whoever that ends up being. I think most likely at this point, it's probably going to be Gonzaga, BYU, and then you've got either St. Mary's or San Francisco vying for probably the 3rd spot. Maybe you have a team pull off the upset of Gonzaga, and then you have a 4-bid WCC because somebody manages to win the WCC tournament, and you get 4 teams in that way. But if Gonzaga wins the WCC tournament, I do not believe there's much of a chance for a 4-bid WCC.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of the best case scenario. It'd probably be if BYU right now is projected, an 8 or 9 seed. I haven't seen since this last weekend, but obviously the San Francisco win helps them. I know St. Mary's has been in the last 4 in group, and San Francisco kind of right before the bubble, kind of as a 10 or maybe an 11 seed without being solidly on the bubble. That might have changed after that BYU loss, but best case scenario, if that's still the situation, would probably be BYU somehow being the number 4 seed and playing us in the semifinals, because they could probably survive a loss there. That'd push them to the bubble, but they still probably get in depending on what happens the rest of the year. And if Oregon keeps playing like they're playing, that win will get more attractive than what it is now. But that's probably the best case scenario. But then still, whoever loses between San Francisco and St. Mary's in the other semifinal is probably out. St. Mary's, I don't even know, who do they have? What are their wins? I know BYU has some not great losses. They lost to Vanderbilt, got kind of smacked by Creighton. Utah Valley isn't a great loss, but they have some better wins.
I think St. Mary's really fucked themselves out of a chance by losing to BYU in the fashion that they did the other weekend. I think had they managed to beat BYU, St. Mary's becomes the second team in the WCC that's probably locked into tournament if you're able to go 1 of 2 against BYU and sweep San Francisco and maybe play a close game against Gonzaga. But I mean, I don't know. St. Mary's had such an opportunity against BYU to snag a quality win against a quality team, especially a quality defensive team, and could not take advantage of zero post defense on their big men, or very little post defense on their big men. So I think they're going to be really screwed. And I think it's going to come down to can San Francisco put together a resume in WCC play that'll allow them to sneak in.
When can any of the teams avoid a disastrous loss against a non-top 4 team? Because if that happens, you're kind of screwing yourself as well. Maybe Santa Clara you can get away with, but other than that, I don't see how they make it in. Yeah, and if you beat Gonzaga, that's probably your tournament ticket right there. But I don't really see that happening. But we've seen crazier things in Provo and at St. Mary's or in the tournament. St. Mary's likes to give us some trouble sometimes. So I guess we'll have to wait and find out. But the 4-bid WCC is not looking great right now. But hopefully we can hang on and get 3 in there. Be great to see San Francisco in there just as a new name. Getting into the tournament outside of, the normal BYU and St. Mary's, but we'll have to wait and find out.
I'm bummed we never got to see Frankie Ferrari in the tournament. That would have been super fun. One of my favorite opposing players during my time at Gonzaga that we got a chance to rib and hang out with outside of games and whatnot. And so bummed for him, although I just saw he was going off in the G League the other night. So, opportunities abound for WCC players after their time in the WCC. One thing that I loved seeing was the amount of people that just went in on BYU fans who are all excited about this move to the Big 12 in the coming years. I love that we're not going to have the door hit them on the way out with hopefully just completely demolishing victories the rest of the way until BYU leaves in, I believe, 2024 after the 2024 season.
Well, it was going to be 2023 was going to be the season. So they would play next season with us in the WCC and then they'd be gone. I know there's been, I think that's still on. And I think the thing that might not be happening is Texas and Oklahoma might not be leaving that year. So there might be 2 years of 15 team Big 12.
15 team Big 12. Jesus.
Because Texas could make the move, but Oklahoma is apparently poor and can't pony up the exit fees or whatever it is to move conferences early and break the TV contract. So Texas doesn't want to go alone, but that's all still being figured out. So yeah, but BYU next year would be the last year.
And they are, if they look like they do now, are going to have really fun time at the bottom of the Big 12 with TCU and who else is down at the bottom there?
Kansas State.
Yes, those are the two that I was thinking of. And like I was going through Twitter. I was going to respond to somebody like, have fun with Kansas State and having the same resume as Kansas State and TCU, but like Kansas State, although they're really bad right now, they're not like their resumes, like their lengthy history in the Big 12 is not bad.
Kansas State's like 65th in KenPom this year. Like the Big 12 top to bottom is not bad. That was why like they beat Texas Tech, and it's like, yeah, like they should have won that game, but Kansas State is not necessarily a bad loss.
Yeah, and I think like BYU, I mean I get it. Like you have football, like I think that is a big portion of it, obviously. But if I'm Mark Pope, I'm furious because you're not setting yourself up for success by going and joining the Big 12 in the basketball realm, at least not for a few years until you can get your feet under you and hopefully change your recruiting strategy a little bit. Yeah,
I mean that would be the hope, right? Is that they can turn around the recruiting and get some bigger name recruits, but at the same time, I know BYU is fairly you're fairly limited on who you're attracting to come to your school because we know, I mean, think about when Jimmer was there and what was his name? Davies. I'm blanking on his first name, but I don't think he was Mormon. Maybe he was, but he broke the code of conduct because he had sex and like self-reported that. Yep. Didn't get to play in the tournament. They made it to Sweet 16, Elite 8, probably should have been a Final Four team, but without him, Brandon Davies was the name. that was a huge piece for them. So, I mean, you got stuff like that. I think their football team is like 90% Mormon. I'm pretty sure the basketball team's on par with that. I know they have the two guys this year that they mentioned on the broadcast are Muslim. But
Barcelo's not Mormon.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure about him.
Yeah, he's not Mormon. Well, because Andy and I were talking about this on the phone the other day. Like the only guys that go to BYU that aren't Mormon are more often than not transfers. So yeah. Matt Harms, I guess Barcelo's not a transfer, but like it's those guys that are coming in.
Yeah, Barcelo transferred from Arizona.
Oh yeah, so most of your freshmen are Mormons because that's a huge attraction. If you're good at basketball and you're a Mormon, you're going to most likely go to BYU or Weber State. But if you're not a Mormon and you're looking for a smaller conference team that you can help, stand out more, like that's an attractive opportunity for guys like Matt Harms, Barcelo, other guys they've brought in from transfers. So, I mean, I think they're not moving locations. Like they're still going to be Provo, BYU. I don't see it as that attractive of an opportunity for really anybody. Hi, Nigel. For really like anybody, despite playing in the Big 12. Because who would you rather go play in the Big 12 and potentially get smacked around by most of your conference? Or would you rather go to BYU and maybe come in second in your conference, or third, still make the tournament? But yeah, you have to play Gonzaga every year. But I don't know. It's a full sport thing. You got football involved. I get it. Am I ultimately that pissed at BYU? No. Do I think it's the wrong decision? No. But all these BYU basketball fans being like, oh, this is so awesome, Big 12. It's like, dude, reality is about to hit you so hard in the face for the next like at least 5 years after you leave WCC.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll get a bump, but maybe a little bit with recruiting. But like, look, they're already competing for most of the Utah recruits if they're Mormon with Utah. Like that's your main competition, right? Especially for football. Is that really going to change now that they're moving to a different conference? I think maybe if they were moving to the Pac-12, you might see some more of the direct competition and they might have the advantage there just with the success of their teams. I know Utah football has been good as well, but like I don't really see how it's going to change that much for them. You're not going to get a ton of new recruits that aren't Mormon or, willing to do what the school requires you to do. So I don't know. We'll see. I think it's a football move. I think basketball, they're going to hope and dream for it to be really good for them. And I don't know. That's a tough conference. It's the best basketball conference in the country. And it has been for the last few years. I know Big Ten's up there too, but this year, if you look at Ken Pom, it's not even close. So yeah. I think it's hilarious when they act like they're so happy to get rid of this trash conference that they haven't been able to win championship in the regular season or postseason ever, and have only made the tournament 4 times in 10 years, going on 11. So yeah, BYU people.
All right, well, that wraps up our discussion of the BYU game, our recent Santa Clara game, how our WCC play has looked so far, kind of what WCC play might shape up into, which is 100-plus points a game, giving up around 80 points a game, but the margin of victory is just really going to push Gonzaga and keep Gonzaga locked in hopefully that number 1 spot for quite a while. Although I will say Baylor did just beat West Virginia by 9, so they did pull away on that one. I know they're not the number 2 team right now, but did a convincing win over a 13-3 West Virginia team. The only other thing we want to plug is that's actually 2 things, both podcast related. So one, whatever platform you're listening, whether it be Spotify, whether it be Apple Podcast, YouTube, whatever, please go follow our other accounts. Give us a favorite, give us a follow, give us a rating on all those platforms. And then I also want to plug another addition to the Zagaholic media family. So Josh, our fearless leader, and a couple other contributors, Tuck and Austin and Kyle, have come together and created the New Bloods pod. They're going to be talking about all things college basketball across the college basketball landscape. I think focusing really on the belt in one of their first episodes, talking about guys teams, that have really been stepping up recently in the college basketball atmosphere. So be sure to go on Gonzagaholic and your Spotify or your podcast platforms and give New Bloods Pod a follow as well. Thank you, and go Zags.
Go Zags.